That's enough.
My husband looked furious and suddenly poured beer on me.
Don't get too cocky when you're the one who gets to live a nice life, all thanks to me. All you have to do is shut up and cook.
I can't stand it anymore. I can't stay with this man after being treated like this. I can't do this anymore. I'm leaving. When I said that, my husband instantly changed his attitude.
Oh, no, please don't do that.
Actually, my husband had to deal with some situation on his own. But it doesn't matter to me anymore, and it's none of my business. You can go straight to hell. My name is Francine. I am a 34-year-old office worker. My husband Wally and I have been married for almost 4 years. We met at a blind date. My husband is an office worker working for a major company. He was 1 year younger than me, so we were almost of the same age, and the conditions he had were perfect. And when we sat next to each other and talked, we had a lot of fun, and I was instantly attracted to him. We then exchanged contact information and started meeting just with the two of us. We went out for drinks after work, went on dates on our days off, and grew closer. Soon, we started to officially go out, and we're a happy couple. It was about a year into our relationship when we got married. Just as I was about to celebrate my 30th birthday, Wally proposed to me.
I want your last memory of your 20s to be a proposal from me. Francine, please marry me.
Yes, I can't wait to get married to you, Wally. I was beyond happy. And so, like this, that was how we got married. Married life with Wally was very enjoyable, and I was happy. However, there was one thing that surprised me a little. My husband was extremely a frugal person.
We will live with less than $2,000 a month, which includes the rent as a married couple.
My husband said something like that the moment we got married. And then he proceeded to live a frugal life more and more.
For the time being, we'll live in this apartment's room.
He showed me a page of an apartment room from the real estates he found on the internet. It was a one-room with dining room and kitchen for $750 per month for rent. I thought it was a bit small for a married couple like us, but after hearing my husband say that he would prefer to have lower fixed costs, I thought that was true, so I agreed to his proposal. When I went to go look at the rooms, it looked surprisingly easy to live in, so I had no issues with it. Then my husband said that we both should contribute $500 for living expenses. The rent was also split 50-50, so we were paying about $900 per person.
The rest of the money we both save and spend on hobbies and things we each want.
My husband works for a major company and his income is much better than mine. And yet, I thought it was great that he was trying to save money that way. I am also thankful that if the amount I pay is about $900, I have a good amount of money for my savings or for my hobbies. I'm not the type of person who is that greedy to begin with, and I was saving for our future life as a couple. My husband saves a lot more than I do, since he hardly buys anything new, and he seems to be working hard to save money. He works for a major company, is kind, good-looking, and frugal, which is impeccable. I thought I got married to a very nice, kind man. But there was one thing that bothered me a little. My husband would not open a joint account for us as a married couple. Well, it's fine if we don't do that. But if we are both working hard to save money, I think it would be better if we could visualize that we are saving money together by putting it in the same account. This could also motivate us to maybe save even more, because then maybe we can think that we can finally dream of buying a house and owning our own home in the future. Well, that's what I at least think, but when I tell my husband about it, he always brushes it off.
If we set up a joint account, and if something happens in the future, and one of us is unable to put money into the account, It'd be a hassle for the one who would end up always putting the money in the account. Don't you think so? I think it's better to keep the money separated in such a way that both of us are independent on their own.
You think so? If that's what you want, then I wouldn't mind, I guess. If my husband is not willing to do it, I don't want to force him to do it. From then on, I accepted the lifestyle of not having a joint account as a couple, and we lived peacefully and had some calm days as a couple. I still spent some days where I wouldn't use my money at all, and I would occasionally go out to dinner with some friends and splurging a bit when buying gifts for my parents. My husband still seems to live frugally, and so after a few years of marriage, we have rarely gone on trips or anything like that. On his days off, Wally would generally stay at home or my husband goes out with friends. But he says that they just go out for drinks at inexpensive popular bars, and even if he goes there, he wouldn't spend much money. My husband is very busy with his work and has to go on business trips over weekends every month, so he doesn't have much time to hang out with his friends a lot. And so, 4 years have passed in our marriage. We have no children, so there is no particular change in our lives. It's not that I was being unsatisfied of our married life, but I was beginning to wonder if we were just living together rather than being a married couple. It sounds nice to say that we were living independently, together, but it didn't feel like we were living as a couple, and it felt more like we were sharing a room together or something like that. I wondered if my husband really loved me. I began to worry about that too. Then one day, my husband says something like this.
I'm thinking of saving money to build our own home for the future.
What? Really? I was happy that my husband said that. I thought he was thinking for the both of us.
So, I'd like you to put more money into the monthly living expenses a little more.
I understand. Then let's set up a couple's account like we're going to build our own home. When I said that, my husband said,
No, we don't have to do that.
What? But why not? Wouldn't it be easier that way?
Don't worry. I'll take care of the family finances. Then I can save more money if I get the money from you, Francine, in cash, and I'll take care of everything.
Really? My husband is certainly a frugal man, but why is he so stubbornly unwilling to set up a joint account with me? I'll help you with the family finances as much as I can too, but...
No, it gets messy and confusing when two people try to do it together. I'll get the money from you, Francine, and I'll give you the money for food and stuff from here.
Okay, if you say so. I felt a little uncomfortable about Wally's proposal, but I decided to follow his idea. And I started to give him about $500 more every month than I did before. According to my husband's calculations, we would put about $1,500 each, and out of the $3,000, we would pay for the living expenses, including rent, and put about $1,700 to $1,800 into savings for building our own home. I was really surprised to hear his idea. If we take out the rent, we'll have about $400 to $500 to put into living expenses. We will have to pay for food, utilities, and daily necessities from there, which means we will have to save a lot of money. In fact, my husband only gave me $250 for food for the whole month. With such a small amount of money, it is quite difficult to make a full daily meal for two people. But my husband is working hard to save money so that we can build our own home, so I must work hard too. With this in mind, I desperately tried to plan out new ways to cook. I used bean sprouts and tofu to add to meat dishes and bought discounted foods and froze them immediately and tried to save money on food costs. I thought to myself that I was making a lot of effort, but my husband gradually began to complain about the meals I have been cooking recently.
Hey, lately, the meals you make always seems to be really bland.
When he complained about this, I was a little offended. Well, that's because the amount of money you give me for our meals is quite small, so I can't help it and try my best, you know. When I said this, my husband's eyes widened and he became angry.
Why are you being so cross with me? I'm saving money for our own home, you know.
Even if that's the case, we're going to have to spend a little more on food, or else we'll end up eating meals like this all the time.
Oh, don't be such a crybaby. I've given you enough money, haven't I? You just have to work it out. I won't increase the food budget from $250. End of discussion. You're the one who has to make the meals in a way that I'd be satisfied with.
Wow, this was just too much. Why would he say such outrageous things? But my husband stubbornly refused to increase our food budget. So I had no choice but to add about $100 from my own income and increase the food budget myself to make ends meet. I knew that if I did not do this, our food situation would become worse and worse. My husband wanted us to cut back on food, but he wanted to drink on the weekends, so he always made me buy beer for him. I thought we could save a little more money if we didn't have that, but I knew that my husband would lose his temper unreasonably if I said that, considering how he was during our last fight. So I didn't have the courage to tell him. And at that time, I still loved and had affection for my husband. So I wanted to make an effort and, if possible, bring things back to the way my husband wanted them to be. However, my thoughts were shattered in an instant. On that day, I had been asked by the person in charge to deliver materials at work. The person in charge had forgotten the material and gone to a client's office, so he called the company in a hurry and someone was assigned to bring it there. And I happened to be available, so I said I would go myself and got in the company car and headed off. On the way there, while waiting at a traffic light, I spotted my husband in town. He was walking with a woman, and the woman was clinging onto my husband's arm in broad daylight. I could not believe my eyes. The woman was an employee where she worked in the same company as my husband, and she was clearly younger, and I was sure she had been at our wedding. Why did they look so close to each other? It was strange to see them clinging onto each other like that. I began to think that Wally was having an affair with that woman. Then I wondered if everything Wally had done up to that point had been for that woman. The unusual frugality, and even more so, Wally's recent words and actions. I think he may have been having an affair and wanted the money to spend for himself and for his mistress, which is why he didn't set up a shared account with me. I don't have any proof yet, but if that's the case, then that's just horrible. It would mean that my husband is limiting his life with me and using the money to have a good time with the woman with whom he is having the affair with. The lights changed and I had to continue driving, but my husband and that woman had their hands on the door of a fancy restaurant. It was lunchtime, which probably means they went to that restaurant for lunch. He wanted me to save money on food, and yet he was the one at the fancy restaurant spending money to eat those fancy meals. I was just filled with anger. And it was at that moment that my feelings for my husband was completely gone. I then asked the investigators to investigate and find out if my husband was having an affair. If he was having an affair, I would divorce him. I was determined to do so. And when the results of the investigation came out, I went to get them. As a result, my husband did have an affair behind my back. He was having an affair with that woman. Moreover, as a result of the detailed investigation, there was information that they had been together before we even got married. In other words, they had been having an affair for more than 4 years. And now, knowing that fact, I could not forgive my husband. I wanted to beat him up right now, but that would put me at a disadvantage. I decided to calmly make various preparations. First, I consulted a lawyer, prepared to get alimony, and then went to a real estate agency to look for a room to live on my own. But when I was somewhat ready, I had an argument with my husband. This was all triggered by none other than my husband.
Don't you think your cooking is getting bland again? Come on, don't serve the same side dishes as yesterday.
My husband started complaining to me just like that about the meals again. I had no affection for him anymore, so I coldly argued back. You're the one not providing enough money for food, so it's no wonder, don't you think? It's your fault that you don't try to increase our food budget. When I said this, my husband stood up with his eyes wide open. Then he took me by surprise.
That's enough.
My husband looked furious and suddenly poured beer all over me.
Don't get too cocky when you're the one who gets to live a nice life, all thanks to me. All you have to do is shut up and cook.
I can't stand it anymore. I can't stay with this man after being treated like this. I can't do this anymore. I'm leaving.
What? You're leaving?
Yeah, I can't live with a lousy scumbag man like you. I said that to Wally while getting a towel and wiping my face with the beer. My husband was clearly upset, as if he didn't think I was actually going to leave.
Don't be so stupid. You are my wife. You're supposed to stay at home, do your chores, and contribute financially to the family.
My husband is pushing his own selfish logic onto me. What the hell are you talking about? That's your selfish point of view, isn't it? I mean, I'm planning to divorce you anyways.
Divorce me? Now wait a minute. Why are you saying something so outrageous and completely unrelated to what we were discussing here?
Well, that's because you're having an affair.
What? No, I'm not.
I even have proof, you know. I showed my husband the photo evidence I had obtained from the investigation. See, this is the proof that you are having an affair. I will divorce you and have you and your mistress pay alimony to me. When I said this, my husband immediately changed his attitude.
What? No, please don't.
My husband was extremely upset. Actually, my husband had to deal with some situation on his own. Wally's mistress was in fact pregnant. As a result of the investigation, I found out that my husband had gotten that woman pregnant. I guess that's why he needed the money, and that's why he was being extra frugal lately. But it doesn't matter to me anymore. I don't care if you need money or not. After all, your life with me was for stability, free money, and to make a good public impression, wasn't it? I got a hold of your colleague and asked him about you, actually.
Excuse me?
And I found out that actually you've been romantically involved with your colleague who's younger than you for a long time. But it seems like you were talking about marrying a woman who would obediently abide by your rules because you had to get married in order to get ahead in life with promotions and whatnot. And I was the one who fell on your trap, right? I really do feel like a complete idiot. So now that I know the truth, I'll take what I can get from you. And you can go straight to hell.
No way.
My husband was frozen, looking completely pale. While I saw my husband being like that, I packed up my belongings and went back to my parents' house for the time being. After that, I demanded alimony from my husband and the woman with whom he was having an affair with. I had sent content certificates to their workplaces and my husband's parents' home so that people around them knew about the affair. During the 4-year period of the affair, Wally's behavior was judged to be malicious, and the alimony was much higher than the normal rate because the marriage had been entered into on the assumption that the affair would continue from the beginning. As a result, I was able to claim $100,000 in alimony from my husband and $50,000 from his mistress. And because my lawyer was excellent, I got no division of property, so the money I had saved on my own did not go to my husband at all. After the divorce, my ex-husband and his mistress were saddled with a large amount of debt. My ex-husband was not frugal, but he had saved money from his marriage to me, and the rest of the money he had saved had been spent lavishly with his mistress, and he had no savings at all. And And because of this incident, my ex-husband was demoted and he had to leave for a rural department in a local area. Wally's mistress decided that it was impossible for her to have a child on her own with the distance between them, so she had no choice but to quit her job and follow Wally. Later, I heard from one of my ex-husband's co-workers that the ex-husband's mistress was having a very difficult time making ends meet while paying alimony, living expenses, and childcare costs. Now they both work double shifts, and they are both a wreck, both physically and mentally. But it's all their own fault, and they deserve what they got. I am working through my lawyer to have their wages garnished mercilessly if they fail to pay their alimony on time. So they will have to spend the rest of their lives paying me alimony. Meanwhile, I have been investing my savings into investments and increasing my assets. Perhaps because of my husband, I have developed the habit of saving money, even if unintentionally, and I have saved up a lot, which is making my life a whole lot easier. I have been thinking recently that I would like to continue to increase my savings without changing my standard of living, and eventually retire a little earlier than usual. It's just terrible that Wally continued a relationship after marriage with someone he had been in a relationship with for quite some time. This is something like a marriage fraud. I hope guys like him would go to hell. I'm glad that Francine was able to claim a large amount of alimony without having any loss. I hope Francine will find a wonderful man this time and find happiness. Thank you for watching to the end. Please subscribe to our channel if you like. See you in the next video.
Out of nowhere, my husband drops this on me. Well, I have to go to work. You're on your own for the rest of the trip to the hospital. What? My brain was foggy from a fever that was soaring over 104 degrees, but I managed to ask him this while he navigated us down a gloomy, nearly deserted street. He was halfway through driving me to the hospital because of my fever. I remember his reluctance when I first asked him to drive me. He had this sour look on his face. But it was him who canceled the ambulance I had called, grumbling, "Don't bother them for just a fever." As I was mulling over this, I noticed he had already pulled over. He got out and swung the passenger door open. Was he seriously going to drag me out? I held on for dear life to the passenger seat with my feeble hands, but it was to no avail. He yanked me out of the car and dumped me on the sidewalk. He gave this dismissive snort, hopped back into the driver's seat, and said, "You're gonna have to wing it from here. The hospital's just an hour's walk away. Don't be a nuisance to others. Clear?" With that, he peeled off. Please, stop. Come back. I knew my words were futile against the receding car. I was too drained to even stand. All I could do was cry and whimper out a cry for help. "Someone help me." I'm Kelly, a 40-year-old full-time mom. I live in a small town with my husband Ray and our 16-year-old son Mike. I met Ray through a friend. Back when we started dating, he would often say, "I'm gonna climb up the ladder, just you watch." I thought that maybe marrying him would lead to happiness, and at first it did. He worked at a well-known company, brought home the bacon. We had fun on our days off, catching movies and shopping. But when our son Mike started growing up, things began to shift. Ray, for one, never chipped in with childcare. He never once changed a diaper, and bath time was always a solo mission for me. Despite being able to take time off, Ray never showed up to any of Mike's school events. Heck, he never even took us on a family vacation. Long story short, he was never really a dad. These days, he and Mike barely exchange words. Of course, I try to mend their relationship, but Ray would always shrug me off, saying he was beat from work. As time wore on, I realized that Ray was more of a chicken than I thought. His grand promises weren't ambition, it was just hot air. His vow to climb up the ladder was just a tactic to keep me from walking away. Sure, he makes a bit more than the average Joe, but compared to his colleagues, he hasn't really made much headway. I don't necessarily need him to be a hotshot, but if he's gonna be all work and no family, he could at least... Those were my thoughts one day after dropping Mike off at soccer practice and whipping up Ray's breakfast. Ray shuffled out of the bedroom and into the living room, giving the breakfast spread on the table a hard, long look. It was the usual stuff: toast, coffee, some fruit, and salad. He slumped into the chair and decided to start off with a sip of his coffee. Then his brows knitted together and he grumbled, "What's this?" Huh? Something wrong? It's the same coffee beans as always. I had already had a cup earlier and it tasted just fine. But he slammed his coffee mug down, announcing, "This is terrible. I can't drink this," before storming out. From that point on, he turned into a regular food critic, finding fault with every single meal I prepared. The lunchbox I lovingly packed for him was mostly untouched, him claiming it was inedible. Even after a long day's work, he barely touched his dinner, whining about being served such food. And his complaints didn't stop at my cooking, oh no. They extended to laundry and cleaning too. He'd gripe about the laundry on the balcony needing better ironing, or he'd swipe his finger on the windowsills, commenting on the accumulated dust. All of a sudden, he was picking holes in the housework, despite me doing everything as I always had. And when he took pot shots at my housekeeping, there was this undertone of comparison, as if any other woman would do a far better job. Something was off. It felt like he'd been paying close attention to other women doing their housework recently. That's when I started noticing his peculiar behavior, taking his smartphone with him to the bathroom, whispering on the phone in his study. I couldn't help but wonder if he was cheating. Eager to find solid proof, I rummaged through his bag, snooped on his smartphone when he was asleep, but found zilch. I thought about hiring a private eye, but he controlled our finances and I didn't have extra cash. So, with this cloud of uncertainty looming, several weeks passed by. Our conversations became even fewer, and it seemed all he knew how to do was complain. It was a high-stress situation for me. And maybe that's why, one late night, I woke up in a feverish sweat. Since I had recently started sleeping separately from Ray, I was on my own. Somehow, I gathered the strength to crawl towards the living room. Of all times, I had left my phone there. As my vision started to swim, I felt a sense of danger. An overreaction perhaps, but I truly felt like my life was hanging in the balance. As I picked up my phone from the living room table to dial 911, Ray happened to saunter in. "Why are you up at this ungodly hour?" Mustering my remaining strength, I explained what was happening. He silently took the phone from my hands. Was he gonna call an ambulance for me? But instead of the relief I expected, he blindsided me with his words. "Calling an ambulance over a little fever? How embarrassing! You can't do housework properly, but you're an expert at causing me problems. If you get what I'm saying, just go back to sleep. You'll feel better." Instead of worrying, he just snapped at me. Half sobbing, I pleaded, "Please, I need to go to the hospital. If not an ambulance, then please drive me in our car." I clung to him, begging almost incoherently. He seemed extremely unwilling, but eventually my persistent pleas seemed to break him down, and he agreed to drive me. "I work tomorrow, you know. How's that gonna affect my sleep?" Ray grumbled incessantly from the driver's seat. All I could do was listen, my head leaning against the passenger window as rain pounded against it. We were barely 5 minutes from home when Ray's phone buzzed. He pulled over and picked it up, ending the call after a short exchange. "I have to go to work. You're on your own for the rest of the trip to the hospital." "What? Work? At this time of night?" My surprise caused him to flare up. "You doubting me? Can't you drop me off at the hospital first before heading to work? It's not a big deal by car. The idea of walking to the hospital in this state, in this rain, seemed absurd. I clung to the passenger seat for dear life. But he was out of the car in no time, ripping open my door, unbuckling my seatbelt, and roughly grabbing my shoulder. Get out, quick! He practically hurled me out of the car with those words. My knees and palms scraped against the ground. The darkness made it hard to see, but it felt like I was bleeding. What the hell? That hurt! I yelled after him, but he just snorted, climbed back in the driver's seat, and zoomed off. Helpless, all I could do was watch his car disappear into the distance. The rain grew more intense, and my fever spiked. The streets were deserted, and my phone was still with him. The hospital was my only option. Using every bit of strength, I started to crawl toward it. The hospital staff would be waiting. Ray had told them I was coming. Other patients were likely waiting too. I couldn't afford to waste any more time. My consciousness wavered as I stumbled and got lost, but somehow I made it to the hospital. It had been 2 hours since I left home, a journey that should have taken 15 minutes by car. I spotted a nurse through the glass door as I tried to enter. Feeling a wave of relief, I lost consciousness. When I woke, I was lying in a hospital bed. The meds or the IV seemed to be working as my fever had broken. A familiar voice broke my trance. My son's voice. Mom, you okay? Mike's face filled with concern. Yeah, I'm okay. Sorry for scaring you. But why was he here? He smiled and helped me sit up, revealing Ray slouched in a chair. Soaked, his hair a mess, and for some reason, his legs trembling. What the heck had happened while I was out? Dad, you owe Mom an apology, Mike said seriously. Startled, Ray looked up. His face was gaunt, dark circles under his eyes. I'm sorry, he murmured. Mike wasn't exactly pleased, but he turned back to me and began recounting what had happened. After dumping me from the car, Ray had apparently headed back home. Mike had been awake, sensing something was off, and noticed my absence. When Ray came home, Mike asked him point blank where I was. Ray, as slippery as ever, tried to weasel out of the question. But Mike, stubborn as a mule, kept pressing him until Ray finally caved and admitted that he'd left me out in the rain. Mike's a big guy, much more so than his timid dad, so you bet Ray was feeling rattled. While they were going at it, the hospital I'd crawled to called and confirmed I was okay. Mike proposed that they head over to see me, but Ray brushed him off with the old, "I've got to work tomorrow" excuse. That's when Mike lost it. He got right up in his dad's face saying, "You're walking your ass to the hospital too." Ray, scared by his son's tirade, ended up jogging all the way here in the pouring rain, all while being monitored by Mike on his bike. Talk about a workout, especially for Ray, who usually commutes by car and avoids exercise like the plague. It explains why he looks like he's been through the ringer. After telling me all this, Mike turned to me with a serious look and said, "Mom, you need to dump this guy pronto." I was shocked. Not because I didn't want a divorce, but because I couldn't believe what I made my son say. All I could do was grab his hand and apologize. After that, Ray and I were on ice for a while. I wanted a divorce, but money was a snag. As a stay-at-home mom, I wasn't sure if I could support Mike properly if I left Ray. I can't help but wonder what was going through Ray's head. Fast forward a few weeks after I got really sick, I got a call on the landline. Hello? You're Ray's wife, right? My name's Adriana. I work with him. Yes, I am. What can I do for you? Adriana told me. Ray and I are in love. Would you mind stepping aside? She'd been having an affair with my husband. I knew my suspicions of his cheating weren't unfounded. If I could divorce, I would. I blurted out, and I meant it. If she wants that jerk, she can have him. Bracing myself for a tongue lashing, I gripped the phone tightly. But she just sounded thrilled and said, "Really? That makes things easier. I've got a good job, so I can handle the alimony. Give me your email and I'll send you plenty of evidence of the affair with Ray. Use it to pressure him into a divorce." I was floored by the offer, but I snapped back to reality fast. This was an opportunity I couldn't afford to miss. I gave her my email, and in no time, my inbox was filled with enough evidence to sink a ship. Cozy selfies of them, screenshots of their meetup messages, you name it. That night, after making sure Mike was asleep, I cornered Ray, who was having a drink. "Hey, we need to talk." He barely glanced at me, muttering, "What?" I was so ticked off, I turned off the TV and slammed the table. That sure got his attention. A ticked off Ray finally looked at me. I plonked the documents in front of him, divorce papers. His eyes nearly popped out of his head. "We're getting a divorce. Seems like you found yourself another woman who's a big shot at work and a whiz in the kitchen." "What? What are you blabbering about? Are you accusing me of having an affair? If so, then prove it." His cocky attitude hinted at a confidence in having covered his tracks well. I wasn't about to let that slide, so I served up all the evidence that Adriana had given me. His self-assured grin vanished instantly, replaced by a face on the brink of tears. Why do you have this? I thought I cleared all that away." "Come on, a divorce is a public humiliation. Doesn't Mike need his dad? And don't you need the money?" So it turned out Ray was more worried about people gossiping about him having an affair and getting divorced. Talk about selfish. I couldn't care less about being embarrassed, and Mike doesn't need a dad like you. You've hardly acted like a father till now, so don't start pretending. If you truly care about Mike, you'll cough up more than enough child support. When he finally registered my unwavering intent to divorce him, he crumpled, sobbing into his hands. "This wasn't supposed to happen." Fast forward 6 months, and Ray and I finally made our divorce official. I staked a claim for a share of the property, damages for infidelity, and child support for Mike. I even hit his mistress with a claim for damages for adultery. All were paid in one big chunk, so I had no worries about getting by for the time being. I thought moving Mike to a new school would be too much, so we shifted to an apartment nearby and are now making do, relying on each other. Word on the street is that Ray and Adriana have started shacking up. But they're both swamped with work and are constantly at each other's throats over household chores. It looks like she was only putting in the hard yards with housework to woo Ray away from me. Now that she's got him, she's probably okay with showing her true colors. To top it all off, they both got the boot for sullying the name of their big company when the word of their affair got out. Both are now strapped for cash after paying off all those damage claims in one go, but that's not my problem anymore. Since the divorce, my son has been growing happier by the day and has thrown himself into his club activities. Watching him excitedly talk about getting to play as a regular in his next game, I couldn't help but feel in my heart of hearts that I'd made the right choice.